So good morning, afternoon, evening to everybody. On behalf of the BRS Secretariat, I'd like to welcome you all to this side event. My name's Susan Wingfield. I'm a Program Officer with the BRS Conventions, which stand for the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions, as many as you may know. So today's side event, we're going to be looking at tackling plastic waste through the Basel Convention. Thanks so much for joining. I see we already have upwards of 120 participants. We had over 300 to register, so I expect we'll be joined by more colleagues as we go on. I'd also like to express our thanks to UNEP for allowing us to host this side event during the margins of UNEA-5. So I'm very excited to have the pleasure of guiding you through our discussion with our esteemed experts today. And of course, you'll also have the opportunity to share your thoughts and questions during the event. Our hope is that you'll gain a better insight into the critical role that the Basel Convention plays in tackling plastic waste. We also hope that you can take some inspiration from the initiatives that we'll be showcasing, be it to control transboundary movements of plastic waste, to ensure the environmentally sound management of plastic waste, or to tackle plastic waste at source. Just before we move on, I have a quick housekeeping note. Due to the size of the event, we've actually muted everyone's microphones, as my colleague just advised. But do feel free to submit any questions or comments that you have through the chat function of WebEx, and you can see that in the right corner of your screens. I think already some are using the chat function, which is great to see. And what we hope is that at the end of this session, we've put aside some time to address questions in the last 15 or 20 minutes of the event. So firstly, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our Executive Secretary of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions, Mr. Rolf Paye. Rolf, welcome, and please, can you tell us how you see the convention's role in tackling plastic waste and what makes it so important? Over to you, Rolf. Rolf, please do turn on your microphone and your video if you can. There you are. Thank you so much.
My video is on. I was waiting to be unmuted, and then I have to do a lot of multitasking here.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Suzanne, and great to see you all here, and thank you so much for joining this side event. As you know, sadly, the global pandemic has already cost far too many lives, which is a forceful reminder of how vulnerable and fragile we are, and also our planet is. Your presence today, however, demonstrates the commitment your country and your organization has made towards solving the plastic pollution issue. Indeed, the pandemic has not only exposed our dependence on plastic, but also the challenges in managing medical waste, a large part of which constitutes of plastics. The widespread use of masks, which has plastic polymers in there, gloves, which have got plastic polymers in there, and indeed the huge amount of protective equipment, which have numerous plastic parts in there, and now starting with vaccinations, with needles and syringes, which have plastics in them, needs our attention. And I think PPE waste and of course the response to COVID-19 has even enhanced the awareness that we need to look at how we can better manage plastics. The Basel Convention, as you know, is recognized for its important role that it has played and will continue to play in reversing the tide and the flow of plastics into the rivers and into the oceans. And as you know, effective last month, I mean the 1st of January 2021, the plastic waste amendments under the Basel Convention became effective, which means that all the parties to the Basel Convention will now need to put in place, measures to manage the plastics listed under the annex of the Basel Convention. Indeed, there will be challenges because not all the countries have the capacities and the resources to manage plastics as stipulated under the amendment, and therefore that is why we have what we call, the parties have agreed what we call the Plastic Waste Partnership, which is designed to support and help countries implement their obligations towards the convention, which whose ultimate objective is to reduce the amount of plastics entering into environment, and of course promoting and encouraging reuse, reduction in the use of plastics, reuse in the context of plastics, and importantly as well, shift from the 9% of plastics that we recycle to even more plastics being recycled through a process of a circular or life cycle approach. As you know, these amendments are only the first steps, and we need to have action at all levels. And here we need action by governments, the private sector, the industry, the civil society, community-based groups, consumer-based groups, and we've seen a lot of these initiatives pop up around the world, which is really escalating into action, across the planet. I would like to thank our generous donors: Norway, France, Switzerland, Sweden, Japan, Germany, and the European Union, as well as from the private sector, who have been able to mobilize around $10 million over the last 2 years towards such actions. So today we have an esteemed panel of speakers, and without any further ado, Suzanne, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rolf, for these insights. If I could just take a few more minutes of your time, because you've mentioned that today's side event is very much focused on all the work taking place under the Basel Convention to address plastic pollution. But I understand there was a recent meeting under the Stockholm Convention on persistent organic pollutants that has relevance to the plastics agenda. Could you tell us briefly about this? Controllers, I think that Rolf may need help with his
Yes,
mute
but
button.
the person is not pressing the thing, so I keep pressing unmute and it doesn't work. So the person has to be very fast on the unmuting, unlocking us to speak. Yes, in fact, it's something that we had been thinking about a lot in the Secretariat. And what was interesting to see that the Stockholm Convention POPs Review Committee looked at a chemical which is an additive in plastics. I don't want to go into a lot of details, Susan, but I just want to say that a lot of the plastics, not all plastics, and I have to be clear on this, but many plastics contain toxic chemicals. And these toxic chemicals, I think we can live without. Although addition of these chemicals impart certain properties to those plastics, such as resistance towards the sun, because they have to be used for certain purposes outside and outdoors. But I think there are alternatives, and we're inviting industry and the academia to work with us, to work with the review committee to identify alternatives to those toxic chemicals. So this is a very interesting development, and I'm hoping that the representatives of the review committee will start looking at more and more of the other toxic chemicals as well, so that they can address this part of the plastics challenge as well.
Thanks very much, Rolf. It's great to hear that there's action on more than one front, not just under the Basel Convention, but under the Stockholm Convention as well. Just before I let you go, another less serious question, if I guess you will. Is there a single-use plastic product that you've recently replaced with an alternative?
Yes, in fact, it was quite difficult when you asked me that question before, because I was thinking of which single-use plastic have I eliminated recently, because I've more or less eliminated plastics. Single-use plastics in the home and in the family and everything. But one that still persists is packaging from the supermarkets when I buy food and products like this. So I'm trying hard to find like vegetables and fruits that are not packaged in plastics. So there are some supermarkets who have an open display for buying in bulk. And I'm lucky to have had some of the supermarkets here. But when it comes to some other products that I buy for the kids to go to school, it's a nightmare. It's impossible to find products with packaging. And I think this is one big area where we need to put a lot of energy in working with consumer associations, but also with supermarkets and other producers in for finding alternatives. I know there's a health issue related to this, but I think we can find a lot of solutions with this type of single-use plastic.
Thanks, Rolf. You're right. I mean, in Switzerland, it is quite, there's quite a lot of packaging in all the supermarkets we note. It'll be interesting to hear from our participants around the world how you find it in your particular localities. If you have any reflections, please feel free to pop them in the chat. Right, so I think at this juncture, we'll move on to the first part of our event, which looks closer at the Plastic Waste Partnership, which Rolf has already mentioned, and how we can deliver towards the goal of minimizing plastic waste in our terrestrial and aquatic environments. We're lucky to have the two co-chairs of this partnership with us today. First, Mr. Ole Thomas Thomassen, who is the Senior Advisor in the Norwegian Environment Agency, and the second co-chair, Mr. Ross Bartley, who's the Trade and Environment Director at the Bureau of International Recycling. So Ole, if it's okay, I'll start with you. We've seen a proliferation of initiatives in the area of plastic pollution. What, in your view, distinguishes the Basel Convention's Plastic Waste Partnership? And how do you expect it to contribute to solving the plastic waste crisis? Ole, over to you. If someone could please unmute Ole, and Ole, please turn on your camera. Thank you. Unfortunately, we're not able to hear Ole at the moment. My apologies. Is there a way that our tech people...
Ole is unmuted, but he may have changed his microphone settings as from earlier, because he could speak earlier. His mic is open. Ole, can you just send us a chat message if you can hear us? Okay, he can hear us. You may need to change the mic settings. You may have changed it from when you joined earlier. You need to go to the audio options icon at the bottom of your screen and maybe change your microphone in the drop-down box.
We're having a few issues here. Well, thank you everyone for your patience and understanding. We've tested all of this prior, but unfortunately, there's a few issues always on the day. So I think what we'll do is, Ole, with your permission, I might just cover the introduction to the partnership on your behalf. Great. And then we can maybe move on and ask Ross a couple of questions about the partnership. So just anticipating what Ole would have said in response to this question, just to give a quick overview of this partnership. So as was mentioned by Rolf, this is one of the actions that was taken by the Basel Convention Conference of the Parties, together with the adoption of the plastic waste amendments. And really, this is complementary action in that regard. The partnership itself, which is a multi-stakeholder or sectoral partnership, has the overall objective of promoting the environmentally sound management of plastic waste and preventing and minimizing its generation. So that's a fairly broad mandate, which the members have managed to distill further down. into some actionable areas, which I'll go through in a moment. But just to give you a sense, we have quite a strong membership of over 200, representing 106 different entities. So when I say entities, we're talking about governments, private sector, NGOs, and so forth. So I mentioned that there are the different areas that the project groups are looking into, and Ross may touch on this more in a moment, but you can see on the right side of the slide there that they're really looking at the main sections of the waste hierarchy, if you will. So of course, prevention and minimization being an important sort of goal, the ultimate goal in the waste hierarchy, but also looking at issues such as collection, recycling, and other recovery. Of course, the Basel Convention, transboundary movements are one of the key provisions of the convention. So the partnership seeks to address transboundary movements and also to add some clarity around the plastic waste amendments and their interpretation. And then there's a last outreach, education, and awareness raising project group. Sorry, is somebody I can hear?
Can you hear me now, Susan?
I can. Oh,
Perfect.
Ola, it's so good to have you. You know, I'm going to hand over to you. So with that brief introduction, please go ahead.
Thank you, Susan. Apologies to everyone. I think maybe if you want to move on, Susan, I think you covered this slide perfectly. So this is an overview of the leadership of the plastic waste partnerships. So it's myself and Mr. Ross Bartley, who is the co-chairs. And then we have the 4 project groups with co-chairs for each project group. And as you can see, there are project group co-chairs from all regions and also from different kind of stakeholders. So you have countries, industry, and NGOs, and other types of organizations. And this slide is also there for you later. So if you want to, contact any of us, you know who we are. So we can move on, please, Susan. Thank you. So as I started to say earlier when you didn't hear me, I think it's a unique factor for the Plastic Waste Partnership that we are mandated by the Conference of the Parties to the Basel Convention, the only legally binding global convention on waste. And we will be reporting back to the Conference of the Parties on results at the next meeting. Another unique thing is that we are a multi-stakeholder partnership from all regions, which gives us a special opportunity to provide experience from all types of actors to inform future policy discussions under the convention. It is a life cycle partnership. We are looking into all the relevant parts of the life cycle for waste, prevention, minimization, design for recycling, and all the waste treatment options, but especially on material recycling. And a unique Basel Convention topic is the transboundary movement to waste, which is now, with the recent amendments to the convention, we have now the rule that you have to have consent from all countries involved in a shipment, which adds a good layer of control and will prevent dumping of plastic wastes on third world countries. And the partnership has an important role in helping all the partners to implement these amendments in a good way. Also, the Basel Convention has regional centers all over the world, which help implement pilot projects, and they also provide expertise on challenges relevant to their regions. And we will hear from some of them later today. Lastly, there are pilot projects also in all regions, which we hope will give practical results on the ground. And we also hear more about them later. So I hope that we can see results here of environmentally sound management promoted and advanced, and that the pilot projects will provide us with best practice projects for implementation in many countries in the future, that we may have, some good projects to copy in a large amount in many countries. And we want on the ground practical solutions and practical information to feed it back into our future policy discussions. So thank you. That is what I have for now.
Thanks so much, Ola, for that very insightful answer, and I'm glad that we finally we managed to get the sound sorted out there, the audio sorted out. So I'll just cross over quickly to our other partnership co-chair. So that's Ross Bartley from the Bureau of International Recycling. So Ross, as a representative of the plastic recycling industry, how do you see the role of the plastic waste amendments and the partnership from a private sector perspective?
Thank you, Susan. Yes, I'm from the Bureau of International Recycling. We're a multi-material organization formed in 1948, set up as a World Federation. Our members involved in recycling are collecting, sorting, mechanically processing, selling and buying the materials, and at the end of the recycling process, delivering a product to the customer, which is the manufacturing industry. So if we can move on to the next slide. Here you see the plastic waste amendments from the decision in COP14, and these became effective 1st of January this year. The situation we're in is, well, not everything is fully elaborated according to the these amendments. People cannot understand all the nuances of these. But in the overview, in the Annex 2, the Y48 listing is of plastics that are difficult to recycle or unrecyclable plastic wastes, Y48. The Annex 8 is of hazardous plastic waste, and that is new as A3210. There was always the obligation and the convention always covered hazardous plastic wastes. So that should not be a surprise. It just puts into writing what was always the case. And the Y48 and the A3210 are controlled in prior informed consent. The Annex 9 has been reduced down from what it was in the past, and that is now a non-hazardous plastic waste, and have to be destined for recycling. Now, the Annex 2 is non-hazardous, and the B3011 are non-hazardous, and they are essentially a reflection of each other. People call them sort of mirror listings. One is not what the other is. Though the advice to people is always to read all of these entries and consider them all together along with their footnotes. Now, with the prior informed consent, that requires the competent authorities in the country of export, countries of transit, and the competent authority in the countries of import to agree to the movement of the Y48 or the A3210 plastic wastes. And it should also be noted that for the B3011, though that's under normal commercial transactions, there may be national regulations that have to be complied with by importers and known by exporters. Now, if we can move to the next slide. The fact that the Y48 is under prior informed consent, and that the movement of import and export is in the hands of the competent authorities. It means also, as I mentioned, the mirror listing, the distinction between what is controlled by competent authorities, this is looking at the first line on this slide, and what is under normal commercial transactions, that there has to be a full understanding of when you have on the ground a container of plastic waste, of how do you differentiate, how do the customs authorities differentiate, how do agencies doing their inspections differentiate, well actually how does the person arranging the shipment know what quality their plastic is that they want to move. So how does it fall in one or the other? And as I had said, the details are in the footnotes, and those haven't quite been elaborated. Though we've been listening over these last couple of days to some really interesting presentations made by different countries and different organizations on how they see what they see those footnotes to mean, or how the countries would view these different listings. And we see, coming on to the second bullet point here, there are differences of opinion. And it's what industry generally, a generalization particularly from a world federation that I come from, is looking for an even transposition in the national laws, even implementation, and even enforcement, and basically overall an efficient system. But at the moment, there is quite a lot of work to be done and quite a lot of communication before people involved in the movement of plastic wastes from country to country, before they fully understand what is in Y48, what is in B3011 in particular. The notification of the hazardous waste listing A3210 and Y48, so said controlled by the competent authorities. One of the things that's coming up onto my desk is companies are finding out that indeed for non-hazardous plastic waste in Y48, they're being asked for financial guarantees. And this is an economic consideration. And that is one of these learning processes. And I think the Plastic Waste Partnership is an ideal place for all those involved in having to deal with these changes to exchange their experiences and understand what needs to be done, indeed, to make the whole sort of system efficient. I just mentioned here on that bullet point on environmentally sound management that the Basel Convention does have a framework for environmentally sound management. It does have requirements on companies and requirements on governments. So this should not be too difficult a concept, as a lot of work has been done on that, and there are a number of tools out there besides the framework itself. And what this would lead to from a company point of view, all good companies would want to be able to show that they are environmentally soundly managed. This, because it is in general, it's a requirement when you're dealing with waste that you do so in an environmentally sound way. And so companies would want to show that. They would need to understand better, if they haven't already done so, the framework for environmentally sound management and the obligations they have. So that is there, and that is something that companies and countries can look to. I point out on the next bullet point, the destination of Y48, that unlike the B3011, the Y48 doesn't say destination R3 recycling. And so the Y48, with the competent authorities agreement, can go to a number of different recovery or disposal operations. And this is where the Annex 4 and understanding the Annex 4 waste management operations is important. And how will the competent authorities decide? Will they decide based simply on the waste hierarchy, or will they bring in climate concerns? So overall, I would say there is no fear for the industrial countries meeting the challenges that come up, but it's clear when we look without any interventions or interventions only in certain industrialized countries, that is economic instruments to force recycling, there is a question of how do we bring worldwide the recycling rate, currently languishing slightly below 10%, how do we increase that? And that does need funding. So that has to be grasped, but left on its own, it sits around that percentage. So there needs to be work to bring that up. So I think the partnership, it's a very good place for everyone interested, involved, and wanting to make this difference, bring the practical changes. It's a very good place for everyone to get together and work together. I think the pilot projects, the good ones, will rise to the top, and those can be replicated in other countries. And I think it's a good place for getting feedback on the implementation. It doesn't so much make decisions, but it will help understanding and help things move along. And so I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much for the chance to talk on these points.
Thanks so much, Ross. Well, both you and Ola have raised some excellent points. I mean, certainly for our participants here today, I mean, many of you will know about, you know, the transboundary aspects of the Basel Convention, but Ross, thank you for mentioning and bringing up the importance of environmentally sound management, which is also an obligation under the convention for all of our parties. And as you said, there is a great wealth of guidance there to help all stakeholders implement environmentally sound management. Ross, you mentioned the pilot projects that are going to take place under the partnership, and this is really a great opportunity now then to look to two of the implementing partners that we now have just recently partnered with to implement 23 different projects under the Plastic Waste Partnership. So if I may, I will start with a colleague, Mr. Nicola Bellafatti, who is from Clear Rivers, who is the International Project Coordinator for Clear Rivers.
Hello.
Nicola, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Fabulous, yes, welcome today. And we just like to hear a bit more about your project that I believe will take place in Vietnam under the Partnership Pilot Project Scheme. And could you tell us a bit about your project and what the expected outcomes will be?
Yes, sure. First of all, I wanted to thank you for having me here today, and I'm honored to be part of this event. It's amazing to see so many people from all over the world connected. It's very inspiring. Before diving into the project in Can Tho, in Vietnam, I would like to give you a short overview about what we do, how we try to tackle plastic waste at Clear Rivers, which is the company I work for. We are a Rotterdam-based NGO, and we're active in the Netherlands, Belgium, Indonesia, and Vietnam. And we try to approach and to offer a circular approach to plastic litter by retrieving the plastic from the water before it reaches the sea, and by recycling it into valuable products. So we looked into different recycling techniques. We also try to raise awareness and educate the future young generations. Let's have a look now at the project in Can Tho. Can Tho is the biggest city in the Mekong Delta. Yeah, thank you. Which is a very interesting but unfortunately quite fragile area in the south of Vietnam. And why Vietnam? Because Vietnam, unfortunately, is one of the most polluted countries when it comes to plastic pollution. And over the last 5 years, since we've been active in Vietnam, we realized that the plastic recycling scheme is rather poor, and often plastic is mismanaged, it's not properly recycled, and it is discharged into the water of canals and rivers, and then it reaches the sea, causing environmental damage. So we want to prevent that. The pilot project aims at installing one retrieving device, which is called litter trap. We would like to install that in Kanto, in front of a market, which is one of the main sources of plastic pollution in the city. We also would like to enhance the recycling potential of the city by setting up a small-scale recycling facility, including different machines, which are going to be used to recycle the plastic. So for instance, a shredding machine, an extruding machine that allows us to produce different items with the plastic that we retrieve, that we will retrieve. And most importantly, we also want to involve local communities and to have a local team of at least 4 people who will be operating the device as well as the facility with us from Vietnam. And together we will try to look into how we can reuse and recycle this plastic and obtain objects that are indeed needed from the local context. And this is the next slide, please. Our main idea is to try to reuse the recycled plastic and build floating structures for agricultural purposes as well as water storage in areas such as the Mekong Delta that suffers from drought, salinity intrusion, and floods. By doing so, we will allow local Vietnamese farmers to have access to their crops throughout the years, and therefore also to have to witness an increase of their income. We will also recycle plastic and raise awareness on a topic that is still unknown, and we do need to raise awareness internationally, but also in Vietnam. So what can I say? I hope we can get a good result soon, and we thank the convention for the opportunity. And well, we can't wait to get started. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nicola. That's great. Very interesting and good to hear that you'll be working in Vietnam, which, as you said, there's a great need for action in that particular region of the world. So over now to Nepal, actually, we're lucky to have Mr. Mahesh Nakami, who is from an NGO called HECAF 360. So Mahesh, could you please tell us a bit about the project that you'll soon be implementing in Nepal and what you expect, how do you expect the project to tackle the growing plastic waste problem in Nepal? Over to you, Mahesh. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Susan. We are very grateful that we have been selected for this project. We are grateful to you and the team. And this is our first project on plastics, being with the Basel Convention. Actually, our organization is a small organization working mostly on the plastics from the healthcare facilities like hospitals. We are more on the plastic, but this time we are trying to do something else on the plastic waste minimization and like that. So we have in Nepal, this project is being partnership with the government of Nepal, with the Ministry of Environment. So this is the situation is very, very worst in Nepal, as everywhere. And plastic is making everywhere problem. So we have almost like 204 tons a day for plastic waste, and plastic is banned by the government several times, but due to the lack of data, it has been very difficult to make it success. So I think the data is very lacking, and that's why we are put this aspect of the in our objective, that we have to have evidence base about plastic waste in Nepal. So and we are doing a consensus on the stakeholders from government, federal government to the local government, and also the various stakeholders. We are bringing together to make it build a consensus on the plastic, to develop plastic policy and that. So this is, can I have the next slide, please? So overall, this is actually the thing that we are trying to work with the university students, because they are the future of the country, and we are trying to bring them in this plastic audit things. So we are trying to partnership with the different universities, environment science departments, where they are teaching the environment science. We are bringing them the practical life, practically in the life of the plastic. We're working with the plastic audit. So this is very important thing, because we are making our future so that they understand this issue, and they can bring us data, and they also learn themselves how we could take out the plastic from our waste, almost like a reduced waste. So in that aspect, we are trying to do develop a municipal national data on plastic waste, and we have a stakeholder commitment for the next steps to reduce plastic waste in Nepal. And we also also want to develop the green protocols and recommendations at local level. Actually, we are trying to develop recommendations with the partnership. This project will be more on not to tell to anyone to what to do, but rather than bringing all the stakeholders in table and discuss together and own the recommendation by ourselves, all the stakeholders. That's the main thing. So that every other now that the plastic waste is use of plastic is banned by several local governments, several times by the other stakeholders, but Bhatam is not success because there is no data and there is no correct approach being done. So this will bring a correct approach to us to make the plastics reduce the plastic waste in Nepal. This is the main kind, because the plastic waste is always moving from urban area, from Kathmandu to up to the Mount Everest. So it's moving. So we want to all reduce that. We want to protect that. Our mountains, our Himalayas, as well as our urban cities with the plastics. And then we will also do the outcome of our policy recommendation for the single-use plastic. So because recently, even during COVID, when we work in our hospitals on the waste management, we found that the drastically increase the plastics because due to the fear of the corona, the hospital has trying to use the single-use plastic plates and spoons and like that. It creates a huge. So we went back to the hospitals and requested them to change with the reusable cup plates, and also we are trying to use the leaf plates, which is our historically this is our actually started from many years, thousands of years ago. We are using the leaf plates in Nepal. So now we are bringing back leaf plates back, replacing the plastic plates. So that's how we advised the hospitals, and it was a great success on that. So this is one thing. This is how we are trying to make impact, but it's very difficult because there is no such systematic approach. So that's why our NGO came with the government to request this with the Basel Convention. So
Thank you, Mahesh.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
You raise an excellent point there, and of course that's the additional pressures that the pandemic is placing on everyone involved in this plastic pollution issue. And it's heartening to hear that you've already taken these issues into account in Nepal and working with the healthcare sector, and we really look forward to the results of that pilot project in the next year to 18 months. Just to clarify that we have another 22 projects, well, I should say another 21 in addition to the 2 that we've heard about today that will be implemented over the next 2 years. And further information on those is going to be made available on our website shortly. So we encourage you to take a look. Also, that it's our intention to issue a new call for proposals for projects in the coming period of time. We're very much waiting to see what our donors will do and seeing the results of the current round of projects, but we're hoping that we can issue a new round for new projects soon. So please do watch this space. So let's now just move on to the second part of our event. And the idea is under this part of the event, we'll look more into our small grants program on plastic waste under the Basel Convention. So we've already covered 2 important areas, of course, the plastic waste amendments and also the plastic waste partnership and the pilot projects that are happening under that partnership. But there's a very big program in addition under the convention, which is this small grants program. And this program is specifically tailored to Basel and Stockholm Convention regional centers. So as it's already been, as Ross has already mentioned, we have 22 regional centers globally, and this program gives them an opportunity to implement actions with respect to plastic waste in the respective regions. So I would very much like to invite, I see Jewel is just turned her camera on, that's great. Jewel, who is the director of our regional center in the Caribbean, welcome, and just hoping that you can tell us a bit about the project to be implemented by BCRC Caribbean.
Hi,
Thanks, Jill.
good morning. Are you hearing me?
Very well, thank you, Jill.
Great. I thought I had the same issue as Ole. Great. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. The Basel Convention Regional Center for the Caribbean is quite happy to be here. And of course, I cannot omit the fact that we also represent the government of Suriname for this particular project, as well as SUWAMA, who is the NGO who is involved in this project. So this project seeks to replace single-use plastic commodities with specific reference to single-use plastic bags in the economy of Suriname. And the approach we're taking is that we are starting from scratch, and we will have consultations with stakeholders about the levels on replacing the single-use plastics. And we do want to examine the inventory side of what's happening in Suriname through this project. So we have intention of testing against, well, hopefully the NORAD-1 toolkit, but if not, there are other modalities that we can examine. And then the actual pilot project, Suzanne, will be based in the capital of Suriname in Paramaribo. And we will now look to replace these single-use plastic bags with locally available options and hopefully cloth bags, and taking you way back to newspaper bags for items such as fish and meats. And this is where we'll have collaboration with women's organizations on the ground in Suriname through the auspices of SUWAMA and the government of Suriname. Ambitiously, we also want to look at developing or attempting to reach 3 zero plastic high schools in collaboration with the university in Suriname, the Anton de Com University. And the last few objectives are to, of course, propose recommendations and an implementation plan for decision makers on replacing single-use plastics. And overall, this for us at the center, we'd want to use this as a pilot that we can share with other countries in the region that we serve.
Thanks, Jewel. I see you've mentioning collaboration with women's organizations. I mean, could you tell us a bit more about how you're going to engage women?
Yes, interestingly, it has to go a few steps back, Susan. And when we got this call for proposals, we sent it out to our partners, and we have to say that SUWAMA and the government of Suriname took the lead, and this was really impressive. So it really is a bottom-up approach. So the SUWAMA group, or they are the Waste Management Suriname, they are a group that exists in Suriname, and they do existing work in recycling and other areas of the environment. And they have contacts with women's groups. So what we'd want to do is train the women's groups on the making of the cloth bags, etc., so that they learn a trade and we create some employment. And hopefully, once the project is successful, we'll then have a group of persons who can then supply the economy of Suriname with this at a local level.
Thanks so much, Jewel. And you know, as with all of the other projects being implemented, I mean, hopefully there's a high opportunity for replication if we see these successful results in Suriname. And
certainly, always, as I said earlier, we always try to, once we have a successful pilot, we roll it out for the rest of the region, because it's always quite incipient in our region. It's good for them to see that there can be successes, and then the following projects always improve from the lessons learned. So it's quite brilliant.
Yes. Well, and this is the beauty of having this global network of regional centers under the convention. So thank you for the excellent work that you're doing.
Thanks very much, Suzanne.
No problem. So I see that we now have Joseph, who has come online from our regional center. He's the director of our regional center in South Africa. So Joseph, I understand that your regional center has both a national level and regional level project that you'll be implementing over the coming months and year. Could you tell us a bit about these projects and what you expect to achieve? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Susan. I will start off with the project. That's a project that is based in a municipality region in the Western Cape province of our country. The focus of the project really is to address a serious challenge of plastic waste pollution, which is currently bedeviling one of the very important estuaries. This estuary actually drains into the Algoa Bay, one of the most important based in the country. And this is estuary, just to paint a picture of the value of the project. The estuary is a very important fish nursery. It is an internationally important bird area, and of course, a very critical biodiversity area in the country. Now, the plastic waste challenge in the estuary is actually threatening all these important areas. Now, what the project is seeking to do is basically to put an end to plastic waste in the estuary mainly, but generally in the area, and that will be able to do of a buyback center. That will really be the backbone of the eradication of plastic waste in the area. And of course, there's a component of training communities on the beneficiation of waste, mainly plastic waste. What the project will be trying to do is really to shift away from the municipality managed waste collection system to a community-based waste management system. And by so doing, and of course, training the communities on the beneficiation of the plastic waste, we'll be looking at reducing and eventually eradicating the plastic waste pollution, but also creating value out of the plastic waste. And we're hoping that through this, we'll be able to effect, the sustainability of plastic waste-free estuary, and also be able to effect, the sustainable livelihoods. And through this project, we're also looking at increasing community awareness on the impact of littering, mainly the plastic littering. So through the creation of the buyback center, the idea is to ensure sustainability of a clean environment post the implementation. So in a nutshell, that's the first project. Now, the second project is a regional project that is implemented in 5 countries in the SADC region, those being Lesotho, Namibia, Malawi, Tanzania, and Zambia. The main challenge when it comes to plastic waste, particularly focusing on the SADC region, is that the national efforts of addressing plastic waste have become ineffective, solely because there's no coordinated efforts in dealing with the environmentally sound management of plastics, and of course the controlled transboundary movement of plastic. What the project therefore will be doing will be developing a regional strategy just to ensure that there is coordination in dealing with environmentally sound plastic, and of course the controlled transboundary movement of plastic. Now, we will, through the project, as I said, be developing the strategy to guide that, so that there's no piecemeal approach by individual countries in the region, so that we move collectively in unison in addressing the challenge of plastic waste. And through this project, we'll be looking at strengthening the stakeholders' capacity for the ESM and control transboundary movement of plastic waste, particularly when we get to a point of the rollout of the strategy at a later stage. That will then enhance the capacity of member countries to be able to deal effectively with the question of plastic waste. In both projects, what we're doing is mainly pilot projects, but of course the focus will be on, at the end of the project, we're being in a position to replicate them. The first project, we intend replicating its outcome to various municipalities within the country. Many of those are facing the same challenge as the mother well. And in terms of the regional project, at the moment, we're focusing only on 5 countries, but we're looking at rolling it out to other countries that are not necessarily part of the project at the moment, at the end of the project, particularly after the development of the strategy. We're looking at that strategy being a document or a product that will be implemented in all the countries in the SADC region. I think in a nutshell that that's the story about the two projects. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joseph, and thank you to Jewel as well. I think you both really hit the nail on the head in terms of what we're seeking to achieve with these different pilot projects. So particularly under the small grants program, I mean, there is the national level initiative, but also the regional initiatives. And the fact that these are going to be replicable and scalable, not only nationally, but within the regions is key. So thank you so much for taking the time to showcase your different initiatives today. So thank you so much. So next we're going to move on the final part of our event, and that is to look at in what other ways the convention is supporting parties with tools, guidance, and technical assistance. And for this part of our event, I'm very happy to welcome my colleague Joost Ditchrist to the floor, who's going to take some time and just walk us through the different other activities under the convention that we're undertaking to help parties meet their obligations with respect to plastic waste. So please, Joost, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Susan. And you're getting better and better at pronouncing my admittedly very, very difficult family name. So well done. So yeah, thank you, Susan, very much. And really happy to be here today and share some of our important tools and the work that we are doing to really support parties in implementing their obligations with regard to plastic waste. In the context of the Basel Convention, in particular in these difficult times with the COVID-19 pandemic, which of course, as we have heard already, has put a lot of stress on waste management infrastructures. So indeed, a wide range of tools and guidance are available under the Basel Convention to support parties in meeting their obligations. These are now of particular importance, as I just hinted upon, given the rapid increase in plastic waste related to COVID-19. So this has resulted in severe repercussions with regard to all the three pillars of the Basel Convention. I assume you're aware with the three pillars of the Basel Convention. So we have transboundary movement, environmentally sound management, and prevention and minimization. So this is what we refer to as the three pillars. And looking at all three of these, we see that COVID-19 has really had very strong impacts on these, and these we need to address with our tools and guidances. So first, just to give a very quick idea of what I mean by this, the pandemic has disrupted international trade, also in plastic waste due to tightened border restrictions, an increase in transport costs, and the need to change shipping routes. So the trade in plastic waste has become more difficult and in many cases not possible. Secondly, many countries, in particular developing countries, face severe difficulties in ensuring the environmentally sound management of plastic waste. With the lockdown and other restrictions, many facilities had to close or run on limited capacity. Of course, those working in the informal sector as waste pickers are particularly at risk, both in terms of their livelihoods as well as with regard to their health. So this will also pose some questions with regard to human rights and such even. And then to move on, I just had to write a quick message. So coming back to the tools, and I just mentioned all these challenges. So how can these tools help us to address these issues? So first, there are those tools, and you see them on the slide now as a rough representation, but there's of course much more than this. There's the framework for the environmentally sound management of hazardous and other wastes, which was adopted by the 11th meeting of the COP. So essentially, the framework identifies what can be done by relevant stakeholders to address the challenges of implementing the environmentally sound management of hazardous and other wastes. In this context, also an ESM toolkit was developed, which addresses a wide range of topics of relevance, including, for example, this really, really critical topic of the informal sector, but also things like private sector incentives. So I really urge you to have a look and see what useful documents you can find. Another example, there's a practical manual to ensure that notifications of transboundary movements meet environmentally sound management requirements, and a guidance on developing strategies towards prevention and minimization. So these tools that I just mentioned, they have been developed generally speaking, and they apply for many types of wastes. However, the COP has also developed and adopted tools and guidance that actually has been developed specifically to address plastic waste. So for example, already in 2002, the COP adopted the technical guidelines for the identification and environmentally sound management of plastic waste and for their disposal. Now, of course, 2002 is a long time ago, and the COP has also recognized this and has given a mandate to update these guidelines. So these guidelines are being updated as we speak, and hopefully in one of the next COPs, these will be adopted so that they can be put to use and really help countries deal with plastic waste in the best possible manner. Of course, given the COVID-19 pandemic, it's also really important to mention that we already have technical guidelines on the environmentally sound management of biomedical and healthcare waste. So this can also prove critical in times of COVID-19. And moreover, we are also developing a draft practical guidance on the development of an inventory of plastic waste, as well as considerations for developing national strategies for environmentally sound reduction and management. So moving on to the other part of Susan's question. So basically, of course, these tools are only the one side of the coin, right? Then what you also need is you need more on-the-ground presence and technical assistance and pilot projects and all these kind of things. We have already heard about the Plastic Waste Partnership as well as the Small Grants Program on Plastic Waste, both of which will be implementing a very large number of pilot projects to really apply these solutions on the ground where they are most needed and really make infrastructure improvements that that will help these countries strengthen their ESM facilities. But there's more, right? And so just to highlight a few other projects that are ongoing. So for example, we have another project funded by NORAD, which is currently being implemented in Ghana and in Sri Lanka. Among others, what we're doing in this project is we're developing or we are strengthening legal and institutional frameworks for the control of transboundary movements. We are training custom authorities so that they can actually also enforce those improved regulations. We are developing inventories so that decision makers can actually make informed decisions because they know where the waste comes from and where it goes and what the hotspots are. And we are also developing national strategies for the environmentally sound management of plastic waste. So these are some of the activities that we undertake there. But just as importantly, we are also implementing pilots on the ground in these countries. So one recent example is the collection and recycling of fishing nets that we have successfully undertaken in Ghana with local partners, where fishermen were given the option, were given a financial incentive to bring back their broken or discarded nets, and they would get a small fee for that, a small compensation, and this really motivated them to bring the nets back, and then they were recycled. They will be sent for recycling, which I think is an excellent approach that we also seek to replicate in other countries. But we're also now starting to test other solutions, such as introducing compostable packaging made from seaweed in shops, canteens, and restaurants, at the Campus University of Ghana, and many others. And then to conclude, we also have a project in Kyrgyzstan, which is more looking at waste in mountainous and remote regions, also looking at ski tourism, mountaineering, etc. And yeah, last but not least, we also have a project in Malawi and Zimbabwe. And this has actually been funded by the Norwegian Retailers Fund. Thank you very much, Susan.
Thanks so much, Jos. That was a lot of information to go through in such a quick time, but we appreciate it. I'd like to now ask Anja Stokken, who we're lucky enough to have here today from the Norwegian Retailers Environment Fund. What motivated you to invest in this particular project in Malawi and Zimbabwe? And can you tell us a bit more about its scope? Over to you, Anja.
Yes, of course, and thank you, Susan and Jost as well for giving us the opportunity to attend this event. So the project, which you already mentioned, is located in Malawi and Zimbabwe, is funded by the Norwegian Retailers Environment Fund. Its implementation started this January, and the project will be running until June 2023. The project will be implemented by the BRS Secretariat in cooperation with the governments of Zimbabwe and Malawi, as well as the Basel and Stockholm Conventions regional centers in South Africa. So the primary objectives of the project is to prevent and reduce the releases of plastic waste to the environments of Malawi and Zimbabwe. More specific objectives and the corresponding activities are built around the 3 pillars of the Basel Convention. So first is to strengthen capacities to control transboundary movement of plastic waste, including by adjusting the legal and institutional framework and training custom authorities. Secondly, to reinforce the environmentally sound management of plastic waste by developing an inventory and a national plastic waste management strategy. And lastly, to scale up prevention and minimization of the generation of plastic waste through pilot projects in key sectors. So with regards to the pilot projects, targeted sectors will be such as those working with packaging, fisheries, textile, and cosmetics. And the targeted sectors are to be confirmed and also adjusted based on the stakeholder consultations and initial inventory findings. There might also be pilots that replicate pilots already being undertaken in Ghana, such as the introduction of edible and compostable packaging for takeaway food and drinks, or the establishment of a collection scheme for waste fishing nets. And further examples and ideas for the potential pilots is to establish a deposit scheme for plastic bottles and to test and work with relevant companies to replace products containing microbeads with better alternatives, or running, for example, plastic-free school campaigns. So for projects like this, engagement of the private sector and civil society will be very critical across the pilots, and also other activities implemented under the project. So the BRS Secretariat, they suggested targeting Malawi and Zimbabwe for this project specifically because of their limited resources to address the challenges of plastic waste. The topic has received quite little attention and support as they are landlocked countries, and this is despite quite a significant generation of plastic waste. And of course, also another aspect that we're hoping to be achieved through the project is that other countries can also learn from the project and replicate activities and pilots in their own context. So for the Norwegian Retailers Environment Fund, the project fits quite well with our vision to make significant and lasting difference to the environment, as well as our objectives, which is to support measures that reduce plastic pollution, increase recycling, and reduce consumption. And for our part, that's particularly also for the plastic bag. We support a wide variety of national and also international projects, and we're also Norway's most important measures in complying with the EU Plastic Bag Directive. So as Norway's largest private environmental fund, we believe that the plastic waste amendments under the Basel Convention are an important global effort to address plastic waste. And we know that there is only so much that the citizens and consumers can do on their own. So we see that there's a need for structural and regulatory change at the international and also national level that deals with the challenges of plastic. And that is ways of dealing with and handling plastic in a way that meets the growing need for action. So one that ensures that we produce, consume, and also dispose of our products in the best and most sustainable way there is. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you very much, Anja. I think something happened to Susan in the meantime. Let's see if she's back shortly. There she is.
I'm very sorry. It's a particularly bad time when your daughter decides to connect to Minecraft on the iPad when you've already got quite low bandwidth. So I apologize for that.
No problem.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Anja, and thank you also for sharing some information on the Norwegian Retailers Environment Fund. I just wanted to ask you both, actually, before you go, a bit of a lighter question, but what have you replaced recently? What single-use plastic product have you replaced with an alternative? I'm sure, Anja, you've got lots of examples given the area of your work you're in, and Jost, I know you're an environmental champion, so we'd be interested to hear.
Do you want to start, Anja?
Yeah, sure, I can start. Well, yeah, definitely, Susan. Like, I worked with this issue for quite some time now. So a lot of my single-use plastic has already been replaced, but I actually had one recent replacement, which I wanted to share, and I brought it with me. I'm sure there's more than myself that have been around on beaches and picked up cotton swabs. I definitely have picked my fair share of them. So this year, my boyfriend actually gave me a reusable cotton swab. It's called Last Swab. So this is one that you can like wash it, and you can use it over and over again. So it's even though I do have paper cotton swabs now, then they're still single-use items. So I thought that was a good example of a reusable item.
Definitely, that's great. Thank you. And how about you, Jost? What have you got?
Well, I won't be able to compete with this amazing example that Anja gave. But so actually my strategy for a very, very long time was, in the office, I always had my PET bottle, and I would just keep, so I was like, okay, I reuse it, so I would sometimes reuse it for like months, maybe half a year, always just pouring water inside again. So I was like, okay, I'm at least not just using it once. So that's already the first step, right? But then you told me it's also not good for my health, reusing the plastic bottle so often. So eventually, fortunately, this summer for my birthday, my girlfriend gave me this, which is like a, kind of thermos, whatever. You can put warm, cold drinks in it, and it keeps the drink cold or warm, whatever you want. You can take it on a hike or just in the office or anything. And yeah, I'm very, very happy with it, and I use it all the time. So no more PET bottles for me.
Brilliant. I mean, both of those are great switches, I think, to make. I also want to put a vote in for beeswax wraps. They're fabulous if you're trying to stop using cling film, for example. They're really good for wrapping items for fridge or school lunches or things like that. Okay, well, thank you both very much. That was great to hear about all the extra activities going on under the convention. I mean, as Rolf said earlier, we've really had a extremely significant period of time over the past 2 years within the Secretariat, within the conventions, with the issue of plastic waste coming to the fore, and there's been a huge spike in activity, particularly in relation to plastic waste. And I really think that the event today has showcased a lot of the projects and activities that are going on under the conventions. So I think we do have 15 minutes for questions and answers. So that is great. So please, can I encourage everyone who may have a question to pop your questions in the chat box, and we'll and particularly if you have a question directed at one of the speakers in particular, could you let us know? So I do already have one question that was put in the chat earlier. I shall just find that question. But please, we do encourage you to continue with some more questions. It's great we've got this additional time. So the first question we have is, can we imagine a worldwide regulation on plastic production regarding single-use plastics, additives in plastic packaging, and recycling symbols? The ocean biosphere crises should be reason enough to take such a step. Now, I'm curious if any one of our speakers would like to jump in and answer that question. I'm just trying to trace back who actually asked the question to begin with, but please, if any of the speakers today would like to take a first answer, please unmute yourselves and go ahead. In fact, it strikes me that our technical folk may have control over the mute button. So
the mics are available to be opened now by participants.
Okay, that's fabulous. Thank you very much, Dan. So please don't be shy. Go ahead. Thank you. Well, if I may, I might direct this question to Ola, being from Norway, and I'm aware that Norway has have fairly strong feelings about a potential global framework on plastics. So Ola, would you like to respond to this particular question to start?
Well, it's not something I actually work with from day to day, but yes, I believe that is our position indeed. I think we have another participant from Norway here who might elaborate if Ingeborg is listening. Doesn't seem so. I don't know if I should really. It's not my role, I think.
I'm here, Ola. I just this is Ingeborg. I am here, so I'm happy to jump in if needs be.
Please do.
Okay, Susan, will you be as kind as to just repeat the question, because I must admit I am in two different events at the same time.
I can imagine, Ingeborg, and we're very grateful that you're able to join us, and it's fabulous that you're here to respond to this particular question. So the question is, can we imagine a worldwide regulation on plastic production regarding single-use plastics, additives in plastic packaging, and recycling symbols? The ocean biosphere crises should be reason enough to take such a step.
Thank you very much, Susan, for repeating the question, which is indeed a very good one. And hello, everyone. I am Ingeborg from the Norwegian Ministry of Climate and Environment, and Ola's colleague working in our team dedicated for a new global agreement. I think the discussion that we're having now on a global level is moving in the direction of what is it that we need to regulate on a global level in order to have an effective tool in a new global agreement, and also what is the environmental problem that we should deal with through such a new global agreement. And there was a lot of very encouraging discussions in the recent meeting of the ad hoc open-ended expert group that took place last November, where we see that more and more countries are now speaking out in favor of a new global agreement, and we are exploring a number of the various components that could be part of such an agreement. And I think one very interesting proposal that came out in the Nordic report on possible elements in a new global agreement is this idea of what is it that we can agree on a global level that would help countries regulate the plastic products that are put on their markets. In the report, these are called sustainability criteria. There are similar discussions also inside the European Union. So it's a very interesting discussion that we need to have on a global level on what it is such a new global agreement could include to be an effective tool. And we're very interested in also hearing from countries how they see this as a useful tool for their own ambitious policy making. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ingeborg, for that very considered answer, and thank you, Ola, for your brief comments as well. Just checking that there's no other speakers who would like to weigh in on this particular question. Of course, we're all going to be waiting with bated breath to see the outcome of the UNEA-5 discussions, which, well, will continue into next year, but will be very instructive in terms of the direction of developing such a global framework or instrument. So actually, what I might do is move on. I see there's quite a few questions that have come in. So what I might do is move on and ask another question. Actually, this is linked, and I think quite an interesting question from Carmen Capril, who's asked how the global agreement on plastics will engage with the Basel Convention. If anyone has any thoughts on that.
Can you repeat the question, please?
The question is, how would a global agreement on plastics engage with the Basel Convention?
Susan, this is Ingeborg. I'm happy to also answer that
Okay,
question.
great, Ingeborg. I mean, you are the expert on this, so that would be, I think that would be a really interesting answer to hear at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. I'm very intrigued by these questions raising to the issue of a global agreement. And of course, you will recall that back in 2017, where we had a landmark decision by UNEA-5, where the world agreed to the long-term elimination of all discharge into of plastic litter into the environment and our oceans. We also pointed to the need to strengthen all existing measures. And as the Executive Secretary Rolf Payet has reminded us of several times, currently the Basel Convention is the only legally binding global multilateral environmental agreement that does regulate this at the moment. And of course, we need to strengthen the Basel Convention, as we have started already with the amendments introduced in 2019. And I believe the partnership as well is a central feature in sharing experiences, bringing around emerging issues, promoting solutions. The way we see the new global agreement from Norway, it will be comprehensive, and it will be an important tool to bring together all the various efforts that are currently ongoing, all the various initiatives, including the Basel Convention, because we do see that the global response is to a large extent fragmented, and we need to promote the coordination and the collaboration within such a framework that the agreement could provide. But we also see that there is a specific area on the issue of plastic waste where Basel Convention has a lot of experience, and we also heard a number of the various products and tools that are useful for countries in their policy making. So for us, at least, the new global agreement will be fairly overarching and should bring together measures also for land and sea-based sources. And there is an obvious place for the Basel Convention within that larger framework.
Thank you. Thank you once again, Ingeborg, and very interesting response there. I see that we have a question that's come in that I think we could pose to all of our speakers today, and this might be a nice way to wrap up the session. So if everyone who presented today, if you could think about the following: what could be the most transformational and or scalable action that could be undertaken to tackle plastic pollution? So you may wish to think about that from, you know, your particular stakeholder group, from that perspective, or in general, if there's an answer that you think, you know, the recycling capacity, global recycling capacity is the number one it's the number one issue to address, or we'd just be interested to hear all of the different perspectives from this different group of stakeholders we have on the webinar today. So any volunteers from our speakers who would like to put their foot in the ring first in terms of proposing what could be the most transformational and all scalable solution to the plastics problem? I see Jost has already turned his camera on, so we'll hand over to you. Thanks, Jost.
Well, I'll be happy to take the dangerous task of being the first to speak on such a topic, but you know, I mean, there's many solutions to this whole thing, right? And they all have a part to play. And certainly, you know, consumer action has an important role to play. Certainly, increasing recycling rates has an important part to play. Certainly, improving access to information through the supply chain so that we don't have toxic chemicals in recycled products has a part to play. Certainly building infrastructures, you know, improving collection schemes, etc., you know, more financial mechanism. All of these like have very valuable, you know, results. However, I think that, and now I'm being a bit the devil's advocate, it might not be enough. All of this might not be enough. Also because you can only push it to a certain way, right? I mean, you can only push, you know, consumers to a certain point. You can only push innovate, like, you know, the construction of new facilities to a certain point. You can only push, yeah. So I think there's two options basically. Option one is that we go into dramatic investments in research and development to try to find better alternatives to plastic. I think that for me is the only viable, really realistic solution I see. That's number one. And number two is do it the legal way. And that ties back to what Ingeborg just said. Have a very strong legal instrument that is able to cover not just the waste part as Basel does, but the whole life cycle. That could be another option. So really, I only see these two options, to be honest.
Thank you. Thanks, Jos. So we've got a couple of votes there, one for the alternatives and then the other for pushing forth with this sort of global framework. I see Mahesh, you would like to weigh in on this issue, please.
Yes, I think what we see in is that first of all, we are not stopping the production of plastics. Production of plastic is going on. The input is always going on. We are trying to control the output, which is very difficult. I think we have to also control the input side. Number one thing. Number two thing that I think we are doing very less research on the alternatives. Like I would like to tell you that we have another project we are doing is that working on the menstrual sanitary waste, where we get a lot of plastic in the sanitary pads. We are trying to change with that with the compostable pads. So we are working on that now. We are trying to bring the banana fiber pads, trying to put the other like the other compostable items. We have already made the standard from the government about the using the compostable pads. But what happens is that there is no research on that. So like small NGO, like we are trying to do some research on that. We are trying to bring some issues and we are trying to bring some solution to that. So if we can involve the big research universities or like so that they can bring every year they can bring the different alternatives of the plastics items like they say sanitary pads, maybe other items. Like we have found the reusable bags instead of the single-use plastics. So people are trying to use that, and we are reducing the single-use plastics in some way. We are trying to bring, like just now, Annie has shown us some kind of a reusable airpads. Those are the, so we have to bring the research is very low now. I think we have to find a solution for this type of problem rather than trying to solve all problems together. Because if you go to the hospital sector, health sector, there are so much plastics using. The blood bag is plastic, the syringe is plastic, but no one is trying to think about that. We are working that, so we know. So that's why we took this project now. We know not the project. This is just the initiation we took that to bring the change on the sanitary pad, because 130 million sanitary pads being used in Nepal. All these go to landfill. All these go to roadside. So we have to reduce that. The solution is that we have to bring the compostable pads so that people can use it. If you have a reusable pads, you need the water. Everywhere in the water is very scarce in the schools, and the schools are having a big trouble with the sanitary pads now because they don't have any disposal methods, and they are just throwing in the street. So we are trying to solve that problem with the schools. But what happens is that we have no resources to do all this. We have some ideas, but there is no resources to tackle that, and we have to bring the universities together. That's why they can do research and give the solutions. In that way, we can solve the global issues, in my opinion. So we have to tackle not in all together. We have to see where are the problems in particular things, like single-use plastic, like the like the plates. There are in developing countries, there are a lot of single-use plastic plates has been used, but we are not telling them to use the traditional one with the leaf plate, and there is no standard on that. So if we can support the government initiative or support the countries to develop that standards of the leaf plates or the other recyclable plates, then the plastic plate will be reduced automatically. So we have to go in other way of thinking, action on that, rather than saying
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mahesh. I'm so sorry to cut you off. I've just been told by our organizers, our technical people, that we're going to have to close the event because we're out of time. But that another great answer. I mean, looking at which of the single-use plastics we can replace that are going to have the biggest impact. You raise sanitary pads, again, another issue. So I think we've definitely got a lot of food for thought from the event. I think we've come to the end, but let's keep the dialogue going. Certainly, we've got, my apologies, I didn't do all the slides, but you'll see here that our website addresses and both myself and Jost, our email coordinates there. So as I said, please keep any questions coming. We're happy to share more information about the various initiatives under the convention, but I hope that today has given you a really good snapshot of what we're doing and why the Basel Convention is an important part and has an important role to play in tackling plastic waste, whether it be terrestrial or in our marine environment. So I'd just like to, on behalf of the Secretariat, thank you all very much for attending today's event. I think we ended up with, at one point, about 210 participants, which is fabulous. We're very grateful to all of you for joining, and of course to all of our excellent speakers. Thank you for taking the time out of your days to come and share the various projects and initiatives that you've been working on. Just a quick note before we go, we will be sharing the PowerPoint presentation that we've displayed throughout the event, and we'll be sending a link to the recording of this event to all of you. So feel free to share across your networks. So with that, thank you so much. Thank you for joining, and wishing you all an enjoyable remainder to your day. And do take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.